Okay, so continuing our ubiquitous theme this morning, we're going to hear some more about the Internet of Things from Jasmine Sesso.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our presentation. I'm going to be talking about malware, security, and the Internet of Things. So we realise that by selecting to look at this subject, we're contributing to already substantial buzz and hype that surrounds anything to do with the Internet of Things. And this is a bit of a problem. It was a problem for us because there was a lot of information out there to sort through, and it's being generated continuously. It's also a problem because it's hard to tell fact from fiction when it comes to the IoT. The overabundance of information on this topic also encourages a level of fatigue in the audience. And this is unfortunate because we're speaking about a topic where much of the hyperbole is warranted. However, the security and privacy concerns are serious as they arise from both its intended functionality and its implementation. Whether the future we're looking at will look more like Orbit City from the Jetsons or Gotham City from the Dark Knight is yet to be determined. So just imagine the drive home from work today was a breeze. Thanks to smart sensors and traffic flow optimisation, traffic jams have become a thing of the past. There was some construction on Main Street, but the car took you on a different route. The streets you drove down were clean and green. The sensors the city uses to monitor the state of the streets seems to be working really, really well. You arrive home, your gate's open, they let you pass through, the lights are on. You step inside, you feel warm, and you catch a few bars of your favourite song. You can smell freshly baked bread coming from the kitchen. Your watch reminds you to start your workout before dinner and automatically checks your heart rate and your blood pressure. You get changed, you wander into the gym. It's a little bit cooler there and the music rises to something more appropriate for a workout. As you start your program, your monitor notes that the joint on your left knee isn't working properly and that the synthetic joint will need to be replaced soon. Checking the monitor again, it might be time to book that in. Afterwards, you're ready to eat dinner and relax. You notice earlier that your toothbrush was flashing in the bathroom. It must be time for a new one, and you see that it's already been added to the automatic shopping list on your fridge. You never seem to run out of things anymore, and you always seem to have exactly what you need. Your food's fresh, your plants are alive, your pet's been fed, and your car is safe, and your house is energy efficient, and it's a sanctuary. Life's good. But what is it really? Essentially, it's an increasing virtualization of the objects that make up our physical reality. While the concepts of ubiquitous computing have long been around, the phrase Internet of Things was first coined over 15 years ago, the interest in the IoT has recently reached a critical point. The utopian promise of the IoT is that with accurate, detailed, and wide-ranging data captured from the physical world via ubiquitous computing, we can take a huge gain in efficiency and effectiveness and reduce the wastage of scarce resources. We can make increasingly accurate predictions, and we can make life better, or for those who can afford it anyway. But what does that mean? The estimated number of objects that will be connected by 2020 keeps rising, with the figure varying considerably depending on the source, from 20 billion to 200 billion at the time we wrote the paper. Possible applications range from manufacturing to healthcare, from managing a house to managing entire cities. A convergence of affordable, enabling technologies in computing, sensing, networking and storage, not to mention IPv6, means the sky's the limit when it comes to possible applications of the technology, from the magnificent to the mundane. The impacts for industries involved are also particularly significant, and they're expected to be a considerable driver for economic activity and development. But there's a dark side too. So again, just imagine, your drive home from work was a bit of a nightmare. The traffic was okay, but the car insisted on taking you home along streets lined with digital advertising boards, all flashing up with ads for brands and companies that you use. Just like the internet, but worse because it follows you around. You really hope your car doesn't have spyware. The ones for personal services, the ads, were particularly embarrassing, and you hope the cars behind you didn't notice. Thank God the kids weren't in the car. You arrive home, and while the lights and heating have turned on to welcome you, the kids have left a huge mess and a note, something about ransomware on the TV. Sometimes you really wish the family didn't know exactly where you were all the time. Privacy just doesn't seem to exist anymore. You're hungry, but the fridge won't open until you've done your exercise, so into the gym for a quick run. As you start your program, the monitor notes that the joint on your left knee isn't working properly. You had a knee reconstruction a few years ago, and the synthetic joint will need replacing soon. Looking at the monitor, you see a note from your health insurer. They've noticed your knee as well, and they've increased your premiums as a result. Bugger. So, what's the problem? As we already know, the IoT is an omnipresent mix of billions of IP-connected embedded objects, smart devices and sensors with web services and software in between. The key features are complexity, heterogeneity, but note also that the objects in the IoT are often both widely distributed and highly constrained with regard to energy, memory and processing. In the IoT, objects only need enough resources and functionality to complete their very particular objectives, for example, data collection, transmission and processing. The security challenges of the IoT rise out of these functional and conceptual characteristics. Ning, Liu and Yang group these obstacles of confidentiality, integrity and availability into three main areas: scope, dynamicity and heterogeneity. We've expanded on this framework to explore these characteristics and their intersection with security in additional detail. The potential scope of the IoT is mind-boggling. As mentioned earlier, the closer we get to adoption and the more applications we envisage for the technology, the more the projected numbers of objects rise. The scope is beyond anything we've ever seen before, and it's certainly beyond the capacity of mere humans to manage, so the use of automation will be necessary, essential even. It also has the potential for multiple points of failure and necessitates significant redundancy, fault awareness and tolerance. It's not inconceivable for proposed solutions to need to scale to at least billions of objects. And of course, it's not just the number of objects, but the amount of data that will be collected and transmitted. The required dynamicity of the IoT brings issues as well, and is a significant challenge on some of our current concepts of ICT security. Objects in the IoT need to be able to interact with many different things at many different times. One of the beauties of the proposed IoT comes with its ability to gather data and react in real time to changing conditions. However, when we think of security communications on the internet today, we often think of secure endpoints with secure point-to-point communication in between. So trust exists while a secure client has a secure connection to a secure server, but it's gone the minute that connection's over. But the IoT is not a connection-oriented system, and many current security protocols are connection-oriented. This brings into question their applicability in this area. Even though there are arguments for continuing to use a centralised, cloud-centric approach for IoT, making management, data processing and physical security easier, a peer-to-peer approach is more in line with the IoT conceptually. The third major obstacle is posed by the heterogeneity of systems that comprise the IoT. While there have been some efforts with regards to implementing standards, such as work done by the groups of companies in the Open Interconnect Consortium and the Industrial Internet Consortium, the IoT essentially consists of a lot of different technologies cobbled together in ways that were not necessarily intended, that may introduce gaps that produce leakage or worse. The rush to market and the pressure to keep costs down is seeing different technologies repurposed and being used together in unexpected ways. Without working standards, the connections between them are less than seamless. Even actually determining what's in the stack and what vulnerabilities are in play is not necessarily an easy question to answer. And of course, if you can determine exactly what technology is in use and what may be vulnerable, that doesn't mean that patching is even viable. The highly constrained nature of objects in the IoT means that some components will remain vulnerable indefinitely, and that traditional solutions to security problems may not even be possible. Privacy concerns in this context warrant special consideration. The amount of data being gathered will be on a scale we've not yet seen, but it's really the types of data being gathered that pose a bigger concern. Healthcare data is already a valuable commodity, and there are recent examples from the wild of its targeting and misuse, but there'll be much more of it, and it'll be much harder to protect in the IoT. And the very notion of ubiquity offers further problems. Even if you don't want to be a part of the IoT, without a type of personal cloaking device, how could you possibly escape from having your personal information monitored, recorded and stored when there are sensors omnipresent in your environment? Addressing privacy concerns is going to require a particularly special effort, and people across the board will need tools, information and support to understand what's at stake, to know who has their data and realise how it's being used. They'll also need to manage their own data and determine access to it as they see fit. So a lot of people are talking about this, and a lot of people are thinking about this. So we reference here a public service announcement from the FBI published on the 10th of September this year. Just the fact that the FBI is making these kinds of public service announcements speak volumes about some of the challenges that we face in securing the IoT, the human challenge. What we take from this is the scale of the human problem and the need to drive user education. We're all familiar with the problem that presents. As we know, educating the user poses one of the most difficult challenges that we face in the IoT in the AV industry. If we consider IoT-connected devices, just to reduce the risk of compromise, we're relying on users to reset default passwords on devices with low or no interface and keep those devices up to date. I mean, how often do you think you might update your heating system or your light bulbs? There's a great deal of time and money being spent on talking about what we can do to secure the IoT, but as yet, not a whole lot of action being taken to actually do this. What we do have is agreement about the approaches that we ought to take to secure the IoT. The Industrial Internet Consortium and the Open Interconnect Consortium are working towards standards that will support interoperability while taking security into account at the same time. Research is going into many different approaches to the problem from different angles, including in areas of cryptographic mechanisms, embedded security, secure applications, and novel frameworks. Progress is even being made with the Internet Engineering Task Force deciding to use datagram transport layer security to secure communication between constrained devices using CoAP. But questions remain regarding this applicability, with concerns that it doesn't actually scale and that it continues to use connection-oriented model that doesn't work particularly well for the full-scale ubiquitous IoT as envisaged. But what is it that we need to do? So in addition to user education, it's imperative that we also invest in technological solutions. We've got a pretty robust list of requirements here that we'll need to meet if we're to succeed in securing the IoT. As you can see, it's a long list, but if we're serious about making security by design more than just a marketing buzzword, this is exactly what we need to do. Considering the problems posed by the nature of technology that makes up the IoT, pragmatic solutions are more likely to recognise the limitations of traditional notions of securing in this context. But what are we likely to do? While there's no doubt that many different groups are thinking of security, several experts seem to be in agreement about the nature of securing the IoT. Again, it's a matter of economics. Many components of the IoT are highly constrained and cheap, which makes security mechanisms hard and expensive. Marketers are often too concerned with getting their product to market to consider security, and technology is rapidly being repurposed. The real impetus for security is likely to come from an economic driver as well. They'll build it, people will come, crime will move in, according to opportunity crime theory. Then something will go wrong, security will be front and centre, and the costs will be worthwhile because of the significant risk posed by what's happening in the wild. So with that in mind, we can safely assume that attackers are likely to apply old techniques to this new technology. So it's no surprise that we're seeing vulnerable devices being exploited, allowing attackers to conduct man-in-the-middle attacks. So what does a man-in-the-middle attack look like in the IoT? So we were recently talking about, earlier today and yesterday as well, a report that someone had used their machine. Someone had had their machine infected by a compromised router. The source of the malware infection wasn't obvious to begin with, but eventually it was established that the router had been compromised. And once the machine connected to it, it too was infected with the malware. It's easy to consider, what's stopping a compromised routers from infecting any device that connect to it? Well, nothing really. So we can muse that the IoT is particularly prone to man-in-the-middle, as so many different divergent devices are connected in, at times, unexpected ways that create gaps that can otherwise be exploited. And patching vulnerabilities will be key to helping secure IoT devices, but one question that continues to arise is, who's responsible for keeping IoT devices up to date? Is it the manufacturer, the seller, or the user? So when we first started writing this paper, we talked a lot about what we thought we might see. And we thought we might see a great big new hack it felt as though there were a countdown to an explosion of IoT device attacks. The fear was building. We thought we'd see a lot more malware by this stage, but we're not. We began asking ourselves, is our visibility into this area weak? Well, quite possibly. We're relying mostly on what is being reported by other AV companies and in the press, and no one's really saying anything much about attacks in the wild. When you search for IoT, you get loads of stories, mostly predictions, often quite scary predictions. We saw a peak in 2014 on doomsday headlines, but we seem to be moving away from this now, and instead we're seeing repeated coverage of POCs. So security is still very much a concern, with data breaches still very serious and a very real risk, but we seem to be moving away from the fear-mongering, which is probably good. So we thought it was only a matter of time before the POCs became reports of attacks in the wild. And there was a glimpse of that to come when the fridge was reported to be hacked recently. And while it turned out to be a case of a threat spreading from a machine to a router to a fridge, rather than a targeted IoT attack, we considered this a peek into the future. Using a man-in-the-middle attack on IoT-connected devices, hackers demonstrated that they can intercept communication between devices. And in a recent widely reported case, a refrigerator's communication was intercepted and the user credentials exposed. So no doubt you heard of the researchers who recently hacked into a car system and took control of a number of the automobile's peripheral functionality before sending it off-road by putting the car into neutral and disconnecting the engine. So exploiting vulnerabilities and man-in-the-middle attacks are not new by any means. We've seen these for years in the AV industry, but for the first time, these attack methods are not only giving hackers access to the data on our machines, but they're letting attackers into every area of our house and business. So think about how often you update or replace your devices. Your phone, probably updating pretty regularly, replacing maybe every year or two. Your computer, hopefully you're updating it pretty regularly, you might be replacing it every year or two as well. Your appliances, never updated and infrequently replaced. The longer you hold on to these devices, the more vulnerable your house becomes. Just having an attacker hack your fridge or thermostat might not necessarily seem like a big security risk, but when those devices are all linked to a network controlled from a computer, the risk doesn't seem that small anymore. Again, we ask, who's going to assume responsibility for patching these devices, and how are we even going to patch them? So it looks like none of our devices are safe. And as we're often reminded, the chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So some figures that were recently touted by the Ubiquity group are that today, roughly 7% of consumers own a wearable internet device. Approximately 4% have an in-home IoT device, and they're predicting that by 2016, 28% of people will own wearable devices, and within about 5 years, 2/3 of consumers plan to buy an in-home IoT device. Gartner predicts that the IoT will create US $1.9 trillion of economic value add by 2020. So I ask you, what out of our current IoT-connected devices could be considered the most valuable to a hacker? How is that value determined? While it's too early to see any patterns emerging, we can see that we have enormous global uptake in IoT devices. There are some pretty interesting search engines that are mapping devices on a heat map. There's no question that the process of large-scale adoption of IoT devices is in progress. And while we believe that these devices will continue to become more available, more widely adopted, cheaper and easier to use, from the most menial task, think a device reminding you that you're out of milk and you need to get some on the way home, to a life-saving task, consider being alerted that your insulin is dangerously high or low before you even experience a symptom. So we've talked a lot about the industry consensus, and we all agree what needs to be done to secure the IoT and its devices. We know that some AV companies are investing in embedded security technology to help protect these devices. And as always, considerations around cost, performance are important, especially when the device scale is so broad, from tiny, inexpensive Fitbits to costly medical machinery. There's an enormous amount of scope for new as well as existing players to step up and work together to secure IoT technology. Threat modelling will be key to ensuring that protective mechanisms are specific and targeted enough to meet the lightweight requirements of protection going forward. So while our traditional, heavy computational or centralised approaches might not work as well here our experience with the analysis of threats from a big data perspective puts this industry in a unique position to be a potential leader and a trusted advisor to many of the other businesses that will come. So as we've seen, the security issues for the IoT are not insignificant. We've talked a lot about that in the last day and a half. Many of the problems really do continue to fall into the too hard basket and will likely remain there for some time. But there's an opportunity here for the people in this audience in particular. The potential for dystopian outcomes is not overstated, but of course, you need to ask yourself, where is the value and what's the risk? Just because something's vulnerable doesn't mean that it'll be targeted. Security has to take a holistic approach. More than product lifecycle management, engineering has to be captured intelligently. And new innovative design goals have to be met to manage the low or no interfaces in real time. The secret to successfully protecting the IoT might be realising that it can't actually be protected, and then working out how we can continue to operate in an environment that is inherently insecure and highly likely to remain so, perhaps indefinitely. As the security experts here, we ask you to respond to this call to action. Be proactive in this discussion, engage with the IoT industry, and share your wisdom in the art of putting security first. That's it. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, we have some time for questions. So in the meantime, what's the tipping point? So how much market penetration do these devices have to do before there's actually some sort of incentive for the bad guys to actually start attacking these things en masse?
I suppose that's the great unknown. We really don't know because we haven't been able to see enough evidence in the wild yet to be able to make a good assumption, I suppose. And that's what we try and touch on quite a bit in the paper, actually. It's like we can speculate an awful lot about what we think might happen, but until we actually see it, we don't know for sure.
So I remember hearing a talk one time where someone from marketing was suggesting that there was some magic number around 21%. So if you see only 20% of people with an Apple headset, it doesn't register in 21%, then all of a sudden, so maybe there's some magical tipping point there. Any questions from the audience? Okay, it's me again.
Thanks, everyone.
So do you think this future is inevitable, though?
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. I think it's inevitable. There's a lot of evidence of wide and global uptake. Devices are a part of everyday life, and they're infiltrating into all different areas and services. So we absolutely believe that it's inevitable. There's no escaping.
But is there a difference then between, say, my computer being locked up with all my data by ransomware and my fridge being locked up by ransomware? Because I can always go out for supper. Yeah. So are we comparing apples and oranges here?
Well, I suppose it really depends how much value you put on the device that's being hacked or targeted. So, for instance, I know if I hate using parents as an example for these things, but if my mum's computer was locked, I don't think it would be a terribly big deal because she doesn't have anything of particular value or importance on it in her world at this current point in time. If your fridge, gets hacked, I suppose it depends on, what you actually had in it, how desperate you are for something to eat. If you're relying on something to eat because of a medical condition, then you need to have something there, like it has a different value. It's all weighted differently. So I think it's relative in a lot of ways.
So if my yogurt is about to go off, then I might be willing to part with some Bitcoin.
Or like if you're a business owner and you're using a device to monitor the temperatures of all of the refrigerators within your business or within within your business, and you might have a chain of businesses, and the monitoring device is hacked and all of the temperatures in every single fridge is tampered with, and you lose potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of produce, then that has a significant value to you.
True. There's a question in the back.
So when you were talking about the refrigerator, there's actually a much more insidious attack. The refrigerator's turned off, the milk starts going bad or something dangerous, but when you return, it's back on, and you don't know that the food was compromised. That was just an observation.
For the fridge, yeah.
Definitely. I mean, and not only that, I mean, how likely are you to immediately assume that your fridge was compromised and it wasn't just a power outage or something that shorted in the system? Similarly, if someone hacks your lighting system or your light bulbs, you might just assume that it's died a natural death and it just needs replacing. You won't necessarily firstly assume or initially assume that it's been compromised in any way. So I suppose we're all on a learning curve when it comes to managing connected devices in a lot of ways. It's new for everyone. Sorry.
Question right there. I think the take-home message is to watch the dairy products.
That's right. Yeah. Well, you do that anyway, right? I would hope.
I mean, I also think there's a liability issue coming from the manufacturer if something like this happens to a fridge. So who's responsible? So you just bought the fridge is new. Somebody goes and hacks it and it stops working. So if you pass this liability to the manufacturer, they would have to take care of securing the device, make sure that it can be updated remotely. I mean, we have the same problem with the Android devices, and somehow, somewhere, it's sort of manageable to the extent where it can be sort of, so to speak, on some level secure. So perhaps here we should consider, maybe I'm just a suggestion that the whole industry should come together on this, and with the insurance, because if something happens to you when you use the fridge and you can pass this liability to the manufacturer, they're going to be hit hard with the dollar signs. So perhaps this is just a comment.
Absolutely. No, I agree. Thanks, Oleg. Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you all very much for coming. This is my first VB, so naturally I was very nervous. Thanks for being a kind audience.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.